Melanie Carter always greeted customers with a smile, even when her own worries threatened to weigh her down. Working as a cashier at Baxter's Grocery in her small-town community wasn't glamorous, but it paid most of the bills most months, at least. She'd been there 5 years, long enough to know many of the regular customers by name. The store was cozy this time of year, adorned with twinkling lights and garlands that sparkled in the evening glow. It felt festive to most, but for Melanie the holidays brought a mix of emotions. She loved Christmas, especially seeing the joy in her 8-year-old daughter Emma's eyes, but the financial strain always loomed like a dark cloud. Despite her challenges, Melanie found joy in the little things, baking cookies with Emma, watching her scribble Christmas drawings at the kitchen table, or cuddling on the couch to watch their favorite holiday movies. This year, though, felt heavier. Rising rent and mounting bills left little room for extras, and Melanie worried how she would afford even a small gift for Emma. As the week before Christmas began, the store buzzed with activity. Customers rushed in to buy last-minute items for holiday dinners, their carts brimming with turkeys, cranberry sauce, and shiny wrapped gifts tucked under bags of produce. Melanie worked the register tirelessly, her smile unwavering even as her feet ached. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, a young mother stepped into Melanie's line. Her cart held basic staples: a turkey, canned vegetables, a loaf of bread, and a couple of modest toys, clearly meant to brighten a child's Christmas morning. "That'll be $83.47, Melanie said, her voice as warm as ever. The woman's face flushed as she began rummaging through her purse, pulling out a handful of crumpled bills and some loose coins. "I think I'm short," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Melanie noticed the tension in the woman's shoulders and the way her hands trembled as she counted. Behind her, customers shifted impatiently, their murmurs growing louder. "It's okay," Melanie said gently, offering a reassuring smile. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her debit card without hesitation. Sliding it into the reader, she glanced up at the woman. "I've got the rest. Merry Christmas." The woman's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I want to," Melanie replied simply. Tears filled the young mother's eyes. She tried to speak, but her gratitude overwhelmed her. With a quiet thank you repeated several times, she gathered her bags and walked away, her head held a little higher than before. Melanie watched her go, feeling a warmth in her chest that made her forget, for a moment, the sting of her own financial worries. She understood struggle. She lived it every day. Helping someone else, even in a small way, felt like a gift she could afford to give. "Next customer, please," Melanie said, turning back to her register. 2 registers down, an older man stood observing the scene with quiet interest. Henry Harper, retired businessman and longtime resident of the town, had stopped by to pick up a few tins of cookies for his grandchildren. His sharp eyes missed nothing: Melanie's effortless kindness, her lack of hesitation, and the subtle weariness in her demeanor that suggested she might have struggles of her own. Mr. Harper paid for his items and left the store, but he couldn't stop thinking about the cashier. Her selflessness lingered in his mind as he drove through the snow-dusted streets back to his home. What kind of person gives so freely when they clearly don't have much themselves? That evening, Melanie returned to her modest apartment, where Emma greeted her with a cheerful drawing she'd made at school. "Look, Mommy," Emma said, holding it up. It was a crayon masterpiece of a Christmas tree surrounded by presents, with the words "Best Mommy Ever" scrawled across the top. Melanie knelt and pulled her daughter into a hug, her heart full despite her worries. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said. "Let's hang it on the fridge." As Emma chattered about her day, Melanie sat at the kitchen table, working through her budget. The numbers didn't stretch far enough, no matter how she calculated. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman at the store, and how close she'd been to pulling her own groceries back. "We're all just trying to make it through," Melanie thought, staring at the empty squares on her calendar. What Melanie didn't know was that her small act of kindness had sparked something extraordinary. Mr. Harper, sitting by the fire in his well-kept home, was busy forming a plan. The day after her quiet act of generosity, Melanie walked into Baxter's grocery with her usual determination to face the long day ahead. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the streets in white. She was grateful that her boots, though well-worn, still kept her feet warm as she trudged through the slush. Inside, the store buzzed with last-minute holiday shoppers. Melanie tied her apron around her waist and settled into her register, exchanging friendly greetings with coworkers and regular customers. Her mind lingered on the young mother from the day before, hoping she had found some peace knowing her groceries were covered. By mid-morning, Melanie's register line grew steady, with carts filled to the brim. As she rang up a young couple buying ingredients for a holiday potluck, she glanced up and saw Mr. Harper enter the store again. This time, he wasn't browsing the aisles. Instead, he walked directly to her line, holding a small basket with only a few items. When it was his turn, Melanie greeted him with her usual warmth. "Good morning again," she said, scanning a tin of cookies from his basket. "Good morning," Mr. Harper replied, setting down his basket. His voice carried the same calm, kind tone she remembered from the day before. "I came back today because I wanted to thank you." Melanie tilted her head in surprise. "Thank me? For what?" "For what you did yesterday," Mr. Harper said, his eyes steady. "That was remarkable, helping that woman like you did." Melanie's cheeks flushed and she shook her head. "Oh, it wasn't that remarkable. She needed help and I just did what anyone would do." "Anyone?" Mr. Harper said with a faint smile. "I'm not so sure. You didn't hesitate, even though it's clear you don't have much yourself." Melanie hesitated, caught off guard by his perceptiveness. She bit her lip, wondering how to respond. "Well," she said finally, "it's not easy for anyone these days, but I believe in helping where I can. I have a little girl at home, and I'd hope someone would do the same for us if we ever needed it." Mr. Harper tilted his head slightly. "You're a mother." "Yes," Melanie said, her smile softening as she thought of Emma. "She's 8, and she's my whole world. Things are tight, but I try to make the holidays special for her. It's just hard sometimes." The words slipped out before Melanie could stop them, and she felt a flicker of embarrassment. She wasn't used to sharing her struggles, especially not with strangers. But Mr. Harper didn't react with pity. Instead, his gaze grew thoughtful, as if weighing her words carefully. "You're doing more than most," he said after a moment. "And I imagine your daughter sees that, even if she doesn't say it. You're teaching her what it means to have a kind heart." Melanie smiled, touched by his words. Before she could respond, another customer arrived at the register, and she had to return to work. Mr. Harper gave her a gentle nod of farewell and left the store, though he glanced back once, as if to commit her face to memory. The rest of Melanie's shift passed quickly, and by the time she clocked out, she was ready to head home. As she gathered her belongings, the assistant manager called her over with an excited look. "Melanie," he said, gesturing toward the break room. "Something came in for you." Puzzled, Melanie followed him. Inside, a small table was piled with gifts. A beautiful bouquet of winter flowers, white lilies, and red poinsettias stood in the center, surrounded by neatly wrapped packages. Her breath caught as she approached, her eyes drawn to a card propped against the vase. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope and found a handwritten note inside. "Dear Melanie, Benigni, your kindness did not go unnoticed. You bring light to others, and it's time some of that light found its way back to you. Merry Christmas to you and your little one. Warm regards. A grateful observer." Tears filled Melanie's eyes as she read the note. Carefully, she began opening the gifts. Among them was a warm scarf and gloves, a tin of gourmet hot cocoa, and a beautifully crafted dollhouse, the very one Emma had admired in the store window. Her coworkers gathered around, murmuring in admiration. "Looks like you've got a secret Santa," one of them said with a grin. Melanie laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by the generosity. She didn't know who had done this, but the thoughtfulness behind the gesture filled her heart with gratitude. That evening, Melanie brought the gifts home, setting the dollhouse in the living room for Emma to find in the morning. When Emma woke and saw it, her squeals of joy echoed through their small apartment. "Mommy, Santa brought it," Emma exclaimed, throwing her arms around her mother. Melanie hugged her daughter tightly, her heart brimming with love. "I think Santa had some very kind helpers this year," she said softly. As snow fell gently outside their window, Melanie sat by the warm glow of their Christmas tree, reflecting on how a single act of kindness could ripple outward in unimaginable ways. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change in ways she could have never imagined. The morning after Christmas, Melanie woke to the sound of Emma humming a cheerful tune as she played with her new dollhouse. For the first time in weeks, Melanie felt a sense of peace. The mysterious gifts had lifted a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. As she watched Emma carefully arrange tiny furniture and dolls, Melanie promised herself that she would find a way to give back again. Her thoughts drifted to Mr. Harper. She hadn't seen him again since their conversation, but something about his words lingered in her mind. It wasn't just what he'd said, it was how he'd said it, with a conviction that made her feel seen. At Baxter's Grocery, the holiday frenzy had quieted, leaving a calm stillness in its place. Melanie's regulars stopped by with leftover Christmas cheer, exchanging stories about family dinners and New Year's plans. The familiar rhythm of scanning and chatting brought Melanie comfort, but there was also a part of her that felt restless, as though something new was waiting on the horizon. Her shift was nearly over when the assistant manager approached her with a curious expression. "Hey Melanie, there's someone here asking for you," he said. "He's in the break room." Puzzled, Melanie untied her apron and made her way to the back of the store. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Mr. Harper sitting at the table, his posture relaxed but purposeful. "Mr. Harper," Melanie said, her voice tinged with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." He stood and smiled warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to talk to you about something important." Melanie gestured to the chair across from him and sat down. "Of course," she said, though her heart beat faster with curiosity. Mr. Harper folded his hands on the table. "First, I want to say how much I admire what you've done. You embody something rare, an ability to give without expecting anything in return. That's a quality the world needs more of." Melanie blushed, feeling both flattered and unworthy. "I just try to do what feels right," she said. "Nothing special." "It's more than that," he said gently. "Your kindness has inspired me, Melanie. It's reminded me why I started my foundation years ago. I believe in helping people like you, people who have the heart to make a difference, but may not always have the resources." Melanie tilted her head, intrigued. "Foundation?" Mr. Harper reached into his coat pocket and handed her a sleek card. She read the words aloud: "Harper Community Foundation, building stronger futures. My foundation focuses on helping individuals and families overcome challenges," Mr. Harper explained. "We fund programs, offer workshops, and provide job training. But what we really do is invest in people, the ones who have the potential to make lasting change." Melanie nodded slowly, unsure where the conversation was headed but captivated nonetheless. "That brings me to you," he said, his tone more serious. "I believe you're one of those people, Melanie. Your story, your heart, your ability to connect with others, it's exactly what my foundation stands for. And I'd like to offer you a chance to work with us." Melanie blinked in surprise. "Me? But I don't have experience in any of that," she stammered. "I'm just a cashier." "You're so much more than that," Mr. Harper said, his voice steady. "You understand struggle, you know what it means to be overlooked, and yet, you still choose to give. That's the kind of person we need. We can provide the training and support you already have. What matters most." Melanie's thoughts raced. The idea of leaving Baxter's Grocery felt daunting, even though she often dreamed of something more. But this? A chance to work with a foundation dedicated to helping others? It was an opportunity she never expected. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Say yes," Mr. Harper said with a smile. "It won't be easy, and it will take time to adjust, but I believe in you, Melanie. And I think you'll find that this is where you're meant to be." After a long pause, Melanie smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "I'd love to be part of this." Mr. Harper extended his hand, and Melanie shook it, her heart full of gratitude and anticipation. In the weeks that followed, Melanie began her journey at the Harper Community Foundation. The transition wasn't without its challenges. At first, she felt out of place in the foundation's modest office, surrounded by people who seemed to know so much more than she did. Her first assignment was shadowing a coordinator at a local food drive. Melanie watched as volunteers bustled about, handing out care packages and offering warm smiles to those in need. She noticed the subtle exchanges: parents glancing at their children with relief, elderly couples clutching their bags tightly with quiet gratitude. As the day went on, Melanie began to help. Her natural warmth and empathy shone through, and by the end of the event she had connected with several families, learning their stories and offering resources the foundation could provide. "That was incredible," the coordinator said afterward. "You have a gift, Melanie. People trust you right away." Melanie beamed, feeling a spark of confidence she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she saw herself in a new light, not just as someone trying to make it through each day, but as someone capable of making a difference. That evening, Melanie shared her experience with Emma, who listened wide-eyed. "Mommy, you're helping people just like Santa does." Melanie laughed, pulling her daughter into a hug. "Something like that," she said. As snow fell outside their window, Melanie felt the beginnings of a new chapter. Her journey was just starting, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure: she was finally stepping into a life filled with purpose. Melanie's first weeks at the Harper Community Foundation were a whirlwind. While the work was fulfilling, it was also daunting. She often felt like a fish out of water during staff meetings, where acronyms and terms she didn't fully understand flew around the table. But every time she felt unsure of herself, Mr. Harper's quiet encouragement and the team's warmth reassured her that she was in the right place. Her early assignments included assisting with ongoing projects, like organizing donations for a clothing drive and helping prepare materials for a workshop on financial literacy. These tasks felt manageable, but Melanie longed to take a more active role. One crisp January morning, Melanie arrived early for her shift, her hands clutching a steaming cup of coffee as she reviewed the day's schedule. The foundation was hosting an open house to introduce the community to its programs, and Melanie was tasked with greeting guests and sharing her experiences as someone who had once faced financial hardship. As the doors opened, people trickled in: parents with children, seniors bundled against the cold, and even a few familiar faces from the grocery store. Melanie's nerves were palpable at first, but as she spoke to the visitors, her natural warmth began to shine through. One family lingered at her table: a father in his mid-30s, his wife, and their 2 young children. The father introduced himself as Daniel, explaining that he had recently been laid off and was struggling to make ends meet. "I just want to get back on my feet," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "It's hard knowing my kids are depending on me." Melanie listened intently, nodding as he spoke. She recognized the same quiet desperation she had seen in the young mother she'd helped at Baxter's. "I understand," she said gently. "I've been where you are, and I know how overwhelming it can feel. But there's hope. The foundation has programs that can help with job training and even childcare resources while you get back on track." Daniel's eyes softened. "You've been through this." Melanie smiled, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "Yes, and I know it's not easy, but taking one small step can make a world of difference." By the end of their conversation, Daniel and his family had signed up for several programs, and his expression had shifted from weariness to cautious optimism. That evening, As Melanie helped clean up, Mr. Harper approached her with a smile. "You were incredible today," he said. "I saw the way you connected with that family. You gave them more than information, you gave them hope." Melanie blushed. "I just shared what I know," she said modestly. "And that's exactly what makes you so effective," he replied. "Never underestimate the power of your story." In the following months, Melanie took on more responsibilities. She began co-leading workshops and even proposed new initiatives to help struggling single parents, drawing on her own experiences. One of her ideas, a mentorship program pairing new participants with those who had successfully completed the Foundation's programs, was approved and quickly gained traction. The work wasn't without its challenges. On several occasions, Melanie found herself overwhelmed, questioning whether she was truly equipped to handle the demands of her new role. One such moment came during a quarterly review meeting. Melanie presented her progress report on the mentorship program, but midway through, she stumbled over a question about the budget. The room grew quiet, and her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. After the meeting, Melanie sat in the break room, staring down at her notes, feeling defeated. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Mr. Harper enter the room until he spoke. "Melanie," he said gently, pulling out a chair beside her, "you're being too hard on yourself." "I made a mess of that presentation," she admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not cut out for this." Mr. Harper smiled, his expression reassuring. "You're learning, and that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. No one expects you to know everything right away. What matters is your heart and your willingness to grow, and you've already proven you have both." Melanie took a deep breath, his words sinking in. "I just don't want to let anyone down," she said softly. "You won't," Mr. Harper said firmly. "In fact, you're already doing far more than you realize." Not long after, Melanie had a breakthrough. She began attending evening workshops on budgeting and project management to strengthen her skills. With each session, her confidence grew, and soon she found herself leading discussions with ease. Her progress didn't go unnoticed. One day, a coworker named Lisa pulled her aside after a team meeting. "I just wanted to say how inspiring it's been to watch you grow," Lisa said. "You've brought such a fresh perspective to this place, and it's reminded all of us why we do what we do." Melanie smiled, deeply touched. "Thank you, Lisa. That means so much." As she walked home that evening, Melanie thought about how far she had come since her days at Baxter's. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had made her stronger. And for the first time, she truly believed in herself. By the time spring arrived, Melanie had transformed. The timid cashier who once doubted her abilities now stood confidently at the heart of the Harper Community Foundation. She was no longer just a participant in its program, she had become a leader. Her mentorship program flourished. Dozens of participants had joined, and Melanie saw the impact of her work in the smiles of parents who found jobs, the laughter of children whose families had found stability, and the gratitude in the eyes of those who finally felt seen and supported. The foundation celebrated her success by organizing an appreciation dinner for the staff and volunteers. Melanie was reluctant to be in the spotlight, but Mr. Harper insisted. "This is your moment," he said with a smile. "Let people see what their kindness has helped create." The evening was a joyful affair, with string lights twinkling above the foundation's garden and tables adorned with fresh flowers. Families Melanie had worked with came to share their stories, and her coworkers spoke warmly of her contributions. Midway through the evening, Mr. Harper stood to make an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonating across the crowd, "tonight we celebrate the incredible work being done here at the Harper Community Foundation. But more importantly, we celebrate the people who make it all possible." He gestured toward Melanie, who sat at a table with Emma beside her. "I want to take a moment to recognize someone who has not only inspired me but has shown us all what it means to lead with heart." Melanie's cheeks flushed as the crowd turned their attention to her. "Melanie," Mr. Harper continued, "your journey has been extraordinary. From the moment I met you, I saw a spark of kindness and resilience that could move mountains. And tonight I'm proud to share that you will be stepping into a new role as the Foundation's Associate Director. Gasps of delight filled the air, followed by applause. Melanie covered her mouth in shock, her eyes darting to Mr. Harper, who smiled warmly. "You've earned this," he said. "And I have no doubt you'll lead us into an even brighter future." Emma tugged on Melanie's arm. "Mommy, did you hear that? You're going to be the boss." Melanie laughed through her tears, pulling Emma close. "Not the boss, sweetheart," she said softly. "But I'll get to help more people than ever." In the weeks that followed, Melanie settled into her new role. The responsibilities were greater, but so was the reward. She worked closely with Mr. Harper, learning the ins and outs of managing a nonprofit, and even began designing a new program focused on affordable housing initiatives. One sunny afternoon, as Melanie visited a community event at the new food pantry, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. The young mother she had helped at Baxter's grocery store months ago stood near the entrance with her son. They waved shyly, and Melanie made her way over to greet them. "It's good to see you again," Melanie said warmly. "How have you been?" "We're doing much better," the woman said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I got a steady job and we just moved into an apartment. None of this would have been possible without the help of the Foundation. Thank you for everything." Melanie smiled, her heart swelling. "You did the hard work," she said. "I just helped point you in the right direction." As they hugged, Melanie felt the full weight of how far they had both come. The simple act of covering a stranger's groceries had set off a chain of events that neither of them could have imagined. Later that evening, Melanie returned home to find Emma waiting with another of her colorful drawings. This one showed a smiling figure standing in front of a building labeled "Helping Place" with a bright sun shining overhead. "That's you, Mommy," Emma exclaimed proudly. "You help everyone." Melanie knelt to pull her daughter into a hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm just trying to make the world a little brighter for you and for everyone else." As the seasons passed, Melanie continued to thrive, pouring her heart into the Foundation's work. The mentorship program expanded to other towns, and her initiatives gained recognition from local leaders. But Melanie remained humble, always reminding herself of the people who had helped her along the way. And though Mr. Harper began stepping back from daily operations, he often reminded Melanie that the Foundation was in good hands. "You've built something incredible," he said one afternoon as they walked through the community garden. "This place has always been about hope, and you've taken that hope and turned it into something even greater. I couldn't be prouder." Melanie smiled, her gaze sweeping over the garden filled with families, children, and volunteers. "It was your vision," she said softly. "I'm just carrying it forward." "No," Mr. Harper said firmly. "You've made it your own. And that's exactly what I dreamed of." Years later, when Emma was grown and leading a life of her own, Melanie still found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The memories of Baxter's grocery, the young mother, Mr. Harper's kindness, all of it had been the beginning of a story that changed countless lives. And as Melanie stood at the grand opening of yet another community center, surrounded by families she had helped, she realized something profound: the light you give to others truly does find its way back to you, multiplied in ways you could never imagine. She looked out at the crowd, her heart full, and smiled,